We're gonna look at this article real fast before we get into Cult of the Lamb, just because I saw this the other day and I had to address it. I had to address it just because I think it is so bonkers, some of the things that this guy says. I think he's got a lot of really good ideas. I want to say that first. This article is really good, got some great ideas, misses the mark in a very important way. I want to be totally fair and upfront about the fact that I don't think this guy has any ill will. I think that very generous with a lot of the things that they say, but the issue always with digital church, and this will be the running theme through the video, the issue with the digital church is that it's really hard to judge it fairly if you're not in it. It's really hard to judge it fairly if you're not in it. This is nothing new. It's the same thing that's been happening in the Fresh Expressions movement since we very first heard of it. You can't understand a beer and hymns until you go to a beer and hymns. Whether you drink the beer or not, you can't understand the camaraderie of the event until you experience the thing. So that's pretty much the article, but we're gonna actually respond to it and read through it so that we can fully understand and wrestle with this guy's challenges here. Boom. All right, so we're gonna read through this really quickly just to respond as we think we ought. We are Checkpoint Church. We're a church for nerds, geeks, and gamers. We're online on Twitch, Discord, and YouTube. We're also everywhere else, but those are our main three platforms. So that's just to help us kind of approach this thing with maximum humility. This song feels super loud. Church must think more, this is from UM News, by the way. Church must think more critically about digital presence. Some of you may remember that I put out a response. Yeah, I lowered it just a little bit. Some of you may remember a response not too long ago that was kind of in favor of metaverse churches, which I have no problem with metaverse churches. We responded to that, but this is kind of a response to that article. Methodism is an inherently practical movement. From the very beginning, founder John Wesley was conscious of the question, what works? In other words, he was intent on finding the best means for reaching his ends, which I understand to be expressed best in his own words, to spread scriptural holiness across the land and reform the nation. Whenever I first read this, I got real excited because I was like, yeah, dude, we're on the same wavelength. I love what you're saying. It sounds like me and you are gonna get along. Wesley's biography is filled with moments in which he discovered new and better ways to accomplish his ministerial goals. I wanna be respectful. This is Wes Magruder. Reverend Dr. Wes Magruder from, okay, it doesn't say where. So, for example, despite his initial misgivings, Wesley began preaching outdoors in fields, where he discovered he could draw large crowds to hear the gospel. Later, he discovered that dividing Methodist societies into classes of 12 was not just an effective fundraising scheme, but a novel approach to pastoral care. He equipped laymen and later women to become traveling preachers, then ordained some of them by his own hands. He's a missionary with GBGM, the General Board of Global Ministries. Perfect. All of these strategic choices were practical solutions to problems that Wesley faced in everyday ministry. It seems that the drive to practical innovation is part of the Methodist DNA. We still ask, does this work? Is this effective? Can this be replicated elsewhere? Totally. That was something that was brought to my attention the moment that I started Checkpoint Church. Was from the very beginning of planning a church, the major question that I was asked by leadership, by the district superintendents, by church developers was, is this replicatable? And it is, but it's got to be pretty specific. 2 years ago, in the early throes of the COVID pandemic, I did some research among North Texas Conference clergy, love North Texas Conference, great people, and found that most were already offering Holy Communion online. Even though they had little to no strong theological rationale for doing so beyond the simple formula, does online communion work? So for those of you that are unaware or uninvolved in this, early in COVID days, we were trying to figure out how to do communion. The Methodist Church was one of the first ones to kind of say, yeah, we can. And the bishops kind of sent down a holy order in smoke in the sky and said, yes, we can do online communion. Almost without exception, the clergy I interviewed framed their decision to offer online communion as a matter of practical necessity. Two went so far as to make it an explicit link to Wesley's own embrace of field preaching. As one said to me, all the reasons that people are saying no to online communion are the very same reasons people said no to field preaching. I obviously can't know if this is true. This is just his own story that he's telling here. This Wesleyan impulse to use, our bishop took about 9 to 10 months before she gave VA clergy permission to do online communion. I feel like it was faster in North Carolina, but it might not have been. But even still, it feels like it was before most did it. Grew up Wesleyan and went to Wesleyan. Cool, very cool. Yeah, we're a Methodist church plant. That's what Checkpoint is. I'm a Methodist elder, provisional elder. The Wesleyan impulse to use any means possible to spread scriptural holiness is admirable to a point. It signals a missional heart, a willingness to act in accordance with the ever-moving Spirit of God, an earnestness to have the mind of Christ. Again, we are still on the same wavelength. Me and Wes are like yes, like I agree with everything Wes is saying so far. I think it's great stuff. I agree with the hesitance towards online communion, to being very wary, to having as many reasons as we can, and to make sure that we're not just saying that we're doing it because of the fact that we're doing it. Agree, yes, good stuff. Critical thinking, love it. Missional heart, love it. Yes, big fan. Everything's good so far. This is where things take a twist. But an uncritical embrace of any and all means is a dangerous position in this particular period of history. We are in the middle of a seismic shift in technology, particularly digital communication technology. Not only do we not know where these new technologies are leading us, we don't know what effects they will have on us as human beings, as Christians, or as Methodists. The United Methodist Church's default position towards digital communication seems to reflect the belief that all technology is value-free. Every new app, platform, and invention can be used for good or evil depending on the user. Therefore, the reasoning goes we can and must embrace these new technologies to spread our own content. We propose to simply apply the general rules to every device we have, asking whether we are doing no harm or doing good. So, I got no problem with the Baptist McDoohoo. You're all good. You're all good. I'm way more specific than denomination. I like to know what people believe on a base level beyond just denominational leaning, because there are so many various flavors of Baptist, and there are so many various flavors of Methodist. The pure illusion that all denominations believe the same thing is so, like, I don't know, impossible. This paragraph is where things kind of take a shift. I don't know necessarily if I would call this the United Methodist Church's default position. I would definitely say that it is my default position. You've heard me talk about this before if you've been on this stream before, if you've heard me talk critically about digital church or about social media platforms or about any kind of platforms along those lines. I would not describe them as being value-free. I would describe them as being tools. I like the word. I see Twitch as a tool, as a medium. To me, to say that technology is value-free is putting too much qualitative data on technology, as if acting like my experience on Facebook is the same experience you have on Facebook. Twitch for us, I've described it as this before, is our coffee shop. Twitch is, so in the church plant community, when you start a church, where do you go? You find the coffee shop, you find the bar, you find the watering hole, as they might have called it in the olden days. You find the place where the people are, and you meet them. What is the coffee shop in that scenario? The coffee shop is a tool. It has no value. Third spaces is another word. It has no value one way or the other. It's not good or bad. It is a tool to be used. And every tool is a little bit different. Some coffee shops may be better than other coffee shops. Some experiences may be better than other experiences. But at the end of the day, the purpose of this place is a tool by which to meet people. So whenever we apply the general rules to this tool, we're not applying it to a value-free or value-full thing. We're instead applying it to the way that we live in this space. It has way less to do to applying it to the platform, way more to do with applying it to ourselves. I think that's where our first difference here goes. I don't know if I would call that the UMC's default position, but maybe it is. Maybe I'm unaware of that. But I think that, yeah, it depends. It comes from the people who use it. They even say that, right? Depending on the user. But even still, I don't think it's a good use or an evil use. I think it's just a use. I don't see Twitch as being a good or bad thing at all. I don't see our Twitch as being a good or bad thing. I see it as being an opportunity to meet people. It's simply a tool used. Simply a tool, simply used. Some people use it as a good or bad thing. But for us as a church, we use it as a tool. Value neutral, maybe. I just don't even see it as being a thing of value. It is a conduit. It's a thing that connects. There's nothing more to it than that. But I could see maybe value neutral would get me a little bit more on board. But I just see it as being that's distracting from even what I would want to refer to it as. Okay, let's continue. That's why the church has mostly supported the practice of online communion. Conferences have held workshops that advocated both and. We love Jason Moore. They didn't say it, but value both and approach to streaming worship online. Practically every local church now has a social media presence. I want to push back again. Every church has had a social media presence, because even the idea of not having a social media presence means you have a social media presence. Even a negative one, even a non-existent one, is an existing one in some way, shape, or form. Because simply by social media existing and you not being present on it, that means that you have an opinion on it. That means you're taking a stance on it, and it's noticed. Yeah. This position could also be seen in a recent news opinion piece, that's what I talked about, that this is a response to, which advocated that the church stake out a presence in the metaverse. The reasoning goes, the metaverse is a part of our world, therefore we should be present in that world to offer Christ. One of the longest running debates among technology's ethicists and philosophers is the question of whether the tools we create, there we go, so he now acknowledges they are a tool, whether the tools we create are truly value-free. From the earliest days of the 20th century, Louis Mumford and Jacques Ellul began sounding the alarm that technological progress itself is not an intrinsic good, and that it can act as a kind of idol, an unacknowledged god of modern society. Agree. I think that it is a tool that we could worship, and that some people do. Marshall McLuhan showed us clearly that every new technology does more to us than we recognize, especially at first. The school of thought which he founded, including such names as Neil Postman and Douglas Rushkoff, continues to sound the warning that social media, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence are not simply tools that we wield at our own volition to shape the world around us. These tools are shaping us, and we don't know yet how they are doing it. So, it's such a weird thing to talk about exactly what you said, Zargathos. These things that are idols, and that technology is more of an idol than anything else. This can happen to anything. It does happen to everything. It is everything should be seen with nuance and with the flavor that it deserves. And to acknowledge that these tools are shaping us is to acknowledge that all things are shaping us. We are shaped by our culture. We are shaped by our environment. That's just life, man. That's just what it is. Of course we're shaped. Of course we're shaped. What a thing to say. I'm shaped by everything that goes on around me, right? I'm shaped whenever I drive down the road and I'm experiencing the momentum of driving, of stoplights, of green lights. I have my own rules and parameters that I set for myself whenever I drive my car, and I am shaped by these things that other people were shaped by. My experience of seeing my dad drive next to me and maybe start to like, whenever somebody slams on brakes in front of him, that was me being shaped by his driving. Of course we're shaped. We're shaped by tools, we're shaped by everything that we experience. It does come into us, and we experience it in some way, shape, or form. Okay, so of course we are shaped by technology. Anybody that does not acknowledge that we're shaped by technology is fooling themselves. Of course we are. Sure, we're shaped by everything, but letting ourselves primarily be shaped by influence around us instead of primarily through Christ is where we lead towards sinfulness. But I don't even know if it's so much of letting as it is intentionally doing things that Christ might do. Intentionally considering things through the lens of Christ. There's only so much letting and allowing we can do, but we can be intentional about doing the things through the lens of Christ. We're beginning to discern that something is not right. We might disagree here. To cite one example, an increasing amount of academic data shows that social media use among young people greatly lowers self-esteem and feelings of self-worth, particularly among girls. Perhaps the most Christian thing the church should do would be to urge young people to stay off of social media. That's a big sentence that he just dropped on us and didn't adequately work that out, okay? There's way more to be said here. There's way more to talk about. To assume that self-esteem was never lowered before social media and that self-worth was never lowered before social media is a false assumption. This has always been a thing. It's just more prevalent now, and we're more aware of it now. Maybe it lowers it more than it did before, and we should talk about that. To throw the baby out with the bathwater is kind of missing the point of the thing. Great example. Right now, there's literally an app out there, I think I follow McDoohoo on there, where it's called Be Real, and the whole idea of Be Real is that you have to post, you don't have to post, you can post it late, but the idea is that at one time of the day, everyone that's on Be Real gets queued up with a notification on their phone that says post within 2 minutes. And the whole goal is it's supposed to be the anti-Instagram. It's not, I mean, it's okay. But the whole idea is that it's supposed to be anti-Instagram, and that you have to do the thing right then, right there. You don't have time to perfect it. You don't have time to set up the social media influencer moment. You don't have time to do any of that. And so that's the goal of that social media. So should I encourage everyone to be on that social media? Should I encourage everyone to jump ship off Instagram and go to that one? Maybe. But I don't know yet. I don't know if it's going to do the things that it's saying. I don't know if it's going to actually be adequate in counteracting the feelings of self-esteem and self-worth loss that we're experiencing. But to say that this is all the fault of social media, I don't think is fair. To say that this didn't happen before social media, I don't think is fair. And to say that because of it, we should just encourage people to be off of social media entirely is naive and impossible. Instead, I'll go back to reading. Instead, the church, like every other institution in the world, actively encourages people to become involved on social media. Who, where, and when? Where am I seeing this? I don't know if I'm seeing this. Active encouragement for people to become involved on social media. I don't know what, again, I think that this might be another naive point of like, where are people experiencing this? I have never experienced the church encouraging me to be on social media. That's just not something that I've felt. Let's see. Maybe we're more aware of social pressures that have always been put on others because technology has brought our world a whole lot closer together. Yep. I will indeed echo that. I think that is the point, right? Social media has done nothing more than amplify the existing culture that we already lived within, right? That's a part of the reason why I love the movie Turning Red so much, is that I think it does a really good way of illustrating the familial drama that existed at the height of social media starting, right? I mean, that was right at that time, still happening before these kids were on social media. They deal with those societal pressures of their family. Highly recommend it. Okay, in fact, the church cannot bear the thought that it should not be present on social media. A little sassy, Wes. You're getting a little sassy now, which I know because I'm always sassy. I don't think that's true. I think that is simply not true. I don't know what churches this guy is experiencing. We have received so much heat because of the fact that we are so present online. The church is so anti-digital church. I would say that more often than not, I find people that are excited about it, but the amount of people that are actually doing it, not very popular. Not really the thing that every church is doing. It sometimes is more like pulling teeth. So I don't know if that's fair. If one were to ask, why must we be so active on social media? The only honest answer that can be given is because everyone else is. This is the sentence that made me want to respond to this article. This is the one. The only honest answer that can be given is because everyone else is. False. 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 The only honest answer for us is because that's where people are not being cared about. Why are we active on Twitch? Because no one in the church is caring for them. Now, obviously, we have groups like Love Thy Nerd, God Squad Church, Jate, Lux Digital. We have all these people that are doing it now, but the reality is that the only honest answer being because everyone else is doing it? Come on. You're a dad talking about like going to a friend's party on Friday nights. You're not talking about an adult planting a church or starting a digital presence online. Don't know where he got this answer, but this was the sentence that absolutely set me off. If one were to ask why must we be active on social media, there are so many more answers than the typical peer pressure answer of because everyone else is. That just ticks me off so bad. So I had to respond because that is just not fair. Exactly, Sneaky. It's probably his answer. Maybe it's an answer that he's heard once or twice. Maybe it's an answer that his buddies talk about as they're sitting around the dinner table ranting about this up-and-coming digital church presence or near them or whatever it may be. But the only honest answer, come on. You're absolutely being unfair to all of the hard work that so many social media people are putting on. So, unfair, Wes. Unfair. You've had me. You've really done a lot of good work here. Very impressive work of working in ideas of talking about things that are very fair of Wesleyan and of the approach to all this stuff. But then you really, really mess up with this sentence. You totally throw away your argument with this obvious, I don't even know if I'd call it a straw man. It is a NIMBY. It's a NIMBY moment. This is a not in my backyard moment. This is a total lapse of judgment call here. Delete this sentence. Delete it. Take it out of the article. Instead, maybe invite with this. Why must we be active on social media? I'd like to hear your answers. That would be a better one. That would be a better question. Why should we be on social media? Okay, let's move on. There's another sentence that kind of cues me off here that we'll get to soon. We're living in a far different time than John Wesley, particularly when it comes to communication media. Agree to disagree. His decision to preach in the fields didn't change the medium of his sermon, it only changed the spatial context. agree to disagree. He still spoke in the presence of his listeners. The act of speaking and hearing occurred in one place. Something different happens when we use electronic or digital communication. Our communications become disembodied. Mind and body are separated. My friend, Wes, you've had me, but you're making these bold declaratives out of nothing. You're making really, really bold statements out of nothing, out of absolutely nothing. The only way that you're proving your point is that I'm reading this article online. You wrote this article you sent this through emails to the people so that you could make your argument. You are now live on Twitch because you wrote this article online that I'm able to read online because you sent it over an email and got approval through an editor. Is my mind in this? Is my body physically in this? Yeah, I'm responding. My shoulders are raised, my hackles are up. My body is in this, as well as my mind, because you wrote this salacious article. You wrote this thing that is unfortunately tone deaf. So let's talk about it. Did preaching in the fields change the medium? Did it change the medium? Did it change the way that people experienced the sermon? No, it didn't. I agree with you. I agree that it didn't change the way that he experienced the sermon. Maybe people were a bit more distracted. Maybe those with ADHD were able to look around and see the trees and birds and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't know what it looked like back then necessarily. But indeed, they received the words. Still spoke in the presence of his listeners. The act of speaking and hearing occurred in one place. What is a speaker? What is a monitor? What is a thing that can be heard? What is speaking if not sound? And those that are experiencing this Twitch right now are hearing my voice actively in real time, and they are hearing it in real time, thus occurring in one space known as 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/checkpointchurch. We can debate the nuance and the freshness of life all day, but to just boldly declare that something different happens because we're disembodied, I beg to differ. I'm interacting with the chat right now in real time. I'm talking to people in real time. My mind is in this, my body is in this. I'm viscerally experiencing this article in community. You just can't make these bold declaratives whenever I have demonstrable evidence that something is happening right now. Let's continue. This is a feature of contemporary life that the church ignores at its own peril. The only one doing any ignorance, the only one doing any ignoring, Wes, my friend, is you. You're the one ignoring things. The essence of our faith is the conviction that God has become incarnate in the world. God took on a body and entered the space-time continuum. What a time to talk about space-time! I just talked about space-time. I didn't even remember that sentence was in this. I just talked about space-time. And the fact that we're all in the same space-time is 9:30 a.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/checkpointchurch. That is our space-time. Jesus is the incarnate one, the perfect image of God. And who are you, Wes, to say that Christ can't live online? Who are you to say that Christ cannot be incarnate digitally? Far be it from me to declare where God cannot be incarnate. Far be it from me. You take that stance if you want to, but please don't stand too close to me, because I would not want to be the one saying where Jesus can and cannot be incarnate. That's all I'm saying. It should be noted that God did not come to us in a disembodied form, but again, you're making a bold claim. You're making the bold claim that it is disembodied. I disagree that it's disembodied. So in essence, where I'm standing and where you're standing, you're saying it's disembodied. I'm saying I'm living it embodied right now. So by you saying that Jesus can't be incarnate in this embodied form, you're setting a box around God. God didn't come to us as a Monty Python-esque floating head in the sky, nor as a televised image or radio broadcast voice. Non sequitur. You totally missed the point. God had a body that could be seen and touched and heard and experienced. I can touch my computer. I can touch the speaker that the sound is coming out of. I can touch the camera. I can read. I can experience. Oh boy. Okay, hang on. Let's go back because we got some things going on here. Paul first went to the synagogues, and then when he was rejected, went to the Gentiles. He went to where the people were and shared the good news with people who needed to hear it. Absolutely. He wrote this article online because he knew it would catch more people than if he had written it on pen and paper. Exactly. You know what's great about the digital church? I don't get it once a week for an hour-ish. It's literally on my mind every day. I'm in community literally every day. Real-time communication that you can't do well during in-person worship experiences. Love the emphasis on the physical body by a group that literally obsess over the presence of a divine, non-physical soul in every person. can't necessarily do well. The group being Christians. I say this to people all the time as one of the biggest reasons why I support digital church, because it is living in constant community. Yeah, absolutely. Jesus can't be in music, movies, video games, online, impossible, right? Totally missing the point. People can also be at work and be lurking in chat on stream, constant worship, constant devotion, redeeming things like games and culture. Absolutely. Did you forget about the Holy Spirit with that sentence? Yeah, a little bit, right? I mean, what are we talking about with bodied and disembodied? We also have a third form. We also have a Trinity. We got all of it. So, I've never touched God. So yeah, what a non-point. Totally non sequitur, totally getting from a side, with the exception of maybe communion. Maybe communion, which again, a good Wesleyan would say as often as we gather. So maybe we should be doing communion every single time. Maybe we should just constantly be in communion. Oh wait, we are! We're constantly in communion. We're constantly in community with each other. Jesus came and instructed his disciples to therefore go, didn't define the how. Also, who is he to say that had the internet been a thing that Jesus lived, he wouldn't have used it? Exactly. May very well have, and is. Jesus is alive and is using it. Jesus is living. Christ has died, Christ has risen, Christ will come again and is present in the kingdom of God that is existing right now. Yeah, great point, McDougal. God has only been physically embodied for people to touch for like 33 years in all of history, right? Or in the body and the bread. That's when we get to experience it. I was listening to something that talks about principles versus laws. Living a principled Christian life is essential to all the members being a part of a collective body. And so we're working towards it. We're working towards living in a principled Christian life. And the best way that we've found to do that is through constant accountability and learning from one another, which we're doing better than any church I've ever been a part of. That is the online church. Here's the central problem. Let's get to his conclusion here. Here's the central problem. We don't know what it means for an incarnational face to be represented in disembodied ways. But again, my friend, the issue you're making is by even calling it disembodied in the first place. This article totally loses its legs just by saying disembodied. We've not yet asked the harder questions about online faith. I agree we haven't asked the harder questions. That's why I wanted to like this article. I wanted to. Whenever I first read it, I really wanted to like it because I so deeply agree that we're not asking the hard questions that we need to be talking about more. We need to. But these are the wrong questions. Will a digital church slowly lose its convictions that God was incarnate? What are you talking about, dude? Will a digital church eventually distort the meaning of the gospel? What are you talking about? Will a digital church eventually become less real, less grounded, and less moved by human sweat and spit? What are you talking about? These are not the hard questions. These are not the hard questions. These are not important. You are totally missing the point. You're missing the point entirely. Those are not the hard questions. Totally not the hard questions that I'm asking. I'm asking, how do we reach new people online? How do we make sure we're not just continuing to reach Christians, but instead we're doing the hard work of evangelism to atheist, agnostic, non-Christians, people that have never heard, the nuns and the duns. What are we doing with the nuns and the duns online? We don't need to be talking about if we're losing our conviction that God was incarnate. I have never once met a person online that is like, you know what I'm thinking about today? I'm wondering if God actually came in skin and flesh. No, that is not a good question. Our evangelistic sense needs to be asking, how are we reaching new people? Are we reaching new people? That is a hard question. That's a hard question of on. The question is, how are we allowing ourselves to move past the consumerist culture of the online church and moving towards a creative sense? That's something that we're really important about here at Checkpoint. That's our whole purpose behind our level 2 thing, is that I want to give people the opportunity to not just consume Checkpoint Church's stuff, but to enter into a relationship with those that are here in this place. That's a hard question. A hard question is, how are we moving past the consumerism of online culture? Good question. How are we allowing Jesus to live in this space? How often do we take communion? We're online 24/7. That's a great question. There are hard, good questions. These are not them. These are not the questions we should be asking, my friend. Rather than rush to use every new digital technology that comes to us because it works, nobody does that. The heirs of Wesley have to do something that he simply never did, develop a critical mindset towards the technologies that we have naively allowed to shape our lives. Again, Magruder, with all due respect, I think you do wonderful work. love a missionary. I'm sure that you do incredible stuff and you had some really great ideas at the beginning, but you've totally lost your mindset. And the only one that's truly being naive is yourself. I don't know if you've not experienced digital church. I don't know if you've not experienced a real digital church. I think maybe you've only ever experienced very surface level examples of people that really are just kind of reaching, but you've totally missed it. We are not disembodied. We're more embodied than we've ever been. We are not rushing into things. We don't do every social media. At Checkpoint, at least, we have 3. Do you know how many social media platforms there are? There are so many. Do you know how many we use? 3. And what's the newest one? Maybe Discord. Discord's been around for quite a while, but I think it's newer. So I have full respect for Wes Magruder. I think that you mean well. I think that you genuinely care about John Wesley and the Methodist approach to digital church. I think you care. I think you mean well, but I think you've missed the mark in not seriously, critically thinking about the right questions. You're thinking critically, but you can't think critically if you're not thinking about the right things. You're asking critical questions that are not critical. Those are questions that are asked by people who are scared of losing their traditional spaces, doctrines, and beliefs. It comes from fear and not from wonder. Yes, there is nothing curious about those questions. There is no imagination. There is no possibility in those questions. Those are fear-based questions. Excellent point, Zargathos. Totally agree. Community instead of content, that's a good question. How are we reaching past digital masks and getting to know people in real ways? Good question. Agreed. Those are all good questions. My big question about the digital church is, how can I serve people in a missional sense? What are people struggling with? What can we do to combat racism online and misogyny online? How can I stop trolls? How can I help people to work past their aggression in the chat section? Those are good questions. What happens if Checkpoint Church reaches out to him and invites him to a stream for a dialogue? I would love a dialogue. Wes, if you're seeing this video, if you're watching it on YouTube, you see we responded to your article, whatever it may be, I humbly would love to have a conversation about digital church and to just pick your brain about the more critical questions. I think you have a genuinely curious spirit, but I think you are afraid, as Zargathos said. I think you're afraid, and it's the same thing that we've talked about again and again and again and again and again. Digital church is not here to replace the traditional church. I have nothing but love for the traditional church. I love to go to a worship service. I love to go to a physical church building. I love to experience the touch of the people around me. I love that. I love it. I love it. I have nothing against it. I am not here to replace or to throw out the law. I am here to fulfill and to reach new people, to extend the loving hand of Jesus Christ to all people of all nations, including the nation of the internet. I think we've said our piece. Great question, the missional challenge of the digital church. These are the questions I'm asking. And Wes, I would so much rather have your opinion and your thoughts and your theological wrestling on the actually critical questions. You bring up a great point. The church does need to think more critically about our digital presence, but you have missed the mark on where that critical presence is. McDoohoo, this may be an ignorant question, but is Checkpoint only online? We are 100% online as of right now. We have game plans in the future of trying to figure out a way for us to maybe meet in person once a year and do kind of like LTN Con does, where we gather together and we take a couple days to celebrate in that moment. But currently we're 100% online. We're on Twitch, Discord, and YouTube only. We're on other social media platforms. We don't use them as community building platforms. We use them as tools. Back to the beginning of the article, we use them as tools with which just to reach people. But our main platforms are Twitch, Discord, and YouTube. From Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria to the ends of the earth, including the digital ones. Yes. So if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching. Appreciate you being here in this video and indulging me as we work through this article. I know that this is tough stuff. These are important questions and important things to consider. And I really do think that this elder has a really good idea of asking these questions, but just misses the mark of what those questions actually are. Even looking at the key points, okay? We're in the middle of a seismic shift. Agree. We don't know how this will affect us. Agree. United Methodist default is that it's value free and that something is not right. That one we probably don't agree on. We must think more critically. 1 and 3, I agree with you on. Number 2, I think you missed the mark, my friend. You missed the mark. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. God loves you. We love you. You matter, YouTube. Thanks for being here. I hope that you've enjoyed this deep dive, this kind of nerdy conversation on digital church. It's an important thing to consider. It's an important thing for us to wrestle with. Yeah, nobody tell the YouTube folks that immediately after we finished that conversation that we played Cult of the Lamb.